Daredevil. My third favorite series of all time at this point in my life. Second only to Breaking Bad and Vikings for me, Daredevil redefined many things. It redefined how I viewed comic book storytelling in the cinematic medium. It redefined how effective small sets, low budgets, and passionate individuals could tackle a larger-than-life character. It redefined how comic book stories could tell mature, meaningful, and emotional journeys without ever devolving into pure nihilism, rampant profanity, and unnecessary violence. Though it's not to say those things weren't prevalent at times in Daredevil's run, it's just that they felt more reserved and impactful when they were present because it made you pay more attention. It also redefined how comic book stories could incorporate action with spectacular stunts, incredible cinematography, phenomenal lighting teams, and absolutely stellar choreography. Daredevil to me was the epitome of comic book storytelling, overtaking my past favorites of The Dark Knight, Joker, Infinity War, and Winter Soldier. Daredevil is simply a one-of-a-kind series that took a gamble on an unknown cast with a modest budget and incredibly popular character, and married it in one of the most passionate crews ever in filmmaking, and ended up crafting a cultural phenomenon and a comic book story of elephant-sized proportional success, both critically and commercially. But, like all elephants as depicted in film and TV, as big, burly, and strong and seemingly unstoppable as they are, they're always afraid of the big, bad mouse.
The hell you get all this crap?
Internet.
The internet. About your long underwear types. Stitch these together yourselves.
My biggest concern with Disney's inevitable adaptation of Daredevil was that they were going to sacrifice what really made Daredevil so special with its 3-season run. And that particular thing that kind of took precedent was the series' effectiveness at telling an emotionally complex story without ever succumbing to melodrama, pandering, or dumbing down. At no point did it stop to try and make sure that the audience was still paying attention, but rather it made the natural assumption that through tonal storytelling and pacing, that the viewers were adults and they knew to pay attention. That's a trait that's uncommon even in higher-end shows like Westworld or Game of Thrones. You know, shows that were aimed and geared towards adults, but still ended up treating them like children by the time they got towards their end. And when it comes to the story and the complexity of their emotional themes, despite starting out so strong. This kind of emotional maturity permeated the entire series, full of beats that made you go, wow, that's not what I expected to happen. But at no point did it ever feel like those oh wow moments were being used as pure spectacle. Every emotional revelation, heartbreak, twist, or character moment held a significance that would influence decisions and story directions in meaningful ways that sent ripples throughout the lives of the other characters. The overarching theme of the series could honestly be argued as choice and consequence. And that is a pretty basic thing to claim, but it works so well as a cohesive whole within the tonality of the Daredevil series. Let's look at the competition, shall we say, that Disney has put out in the recent years on Disney+. WandaVision is probably the closest that a series has come to being relatively close in terms of emotional complexity and uniqueness. However, it then completely squanders that goodwill by trying to make it out like Scarlet Witch isn't the villain. It tries to ham-fest a morality lesson about judgment and loss while ignoring the lives that Wanda ruins and the people that she murdered to get what she wanted. It completely unravels her entire arc, all for the sake of trying to do something different with no real plan. Falcon Winter Soldier is, in my opinion, the single worst offender when it comes to wasted potential. No character moments hold any weight or shape or significant change in the world, nor do they serve to elevate any singular character to anything more than a warm body to fill the shoes of better alternatives of themselves. Walker had potential, but they were so afraid to make him a real anti-hero that they just made him a ripoff of the Winter Soldier, in a series that literally stars the Winter fucking Soldier. Sam is completely wasted and undergoes no significant changes. He's still stalwart, strong, smart, and wisecracking, which is what we already saw of him in every other appearance that he was in the MCU. Bucky is still gay. What about Loki? Well, when it isn't retconning all of Loki's backstory, clowning on him as a useless puppet of others, making him a slapstick laughingstock for almost the entire fucking episode.
Ow. I hope you know you deserve to be alone, and you always will be.
All right. A bad memory prison? How quaint.
Or making his entire arc irrelevant by showing him the future, this series is completely underwriting the entire Infinity Saga by introducing Kang and telling viewers that everything was preordained.
Every step you took to get here, I paved the road.
So no sacrifices meant anything and no changes were spontaneous, which could have been cool if executed well and not explained to us like we're actual children. I mean, using the words of Kang himself.
No, it's practical.
It was personal to me.
Oh, grow up! Grow up, Sylvie! Murderer! Hypocrite!
Moon Knight is possibly the only series to come out of Disney Plus to actually take itself seriously for almost the entire runtime and not underwrite every single emotional beat with a fucking joke or a stupid reference to another character or event, and for that, I give it major props. But while Kevin Feige said and promised that Moon Knight would be the most brutal, emotional, and mature series that Disney has tackled, I mean, I guess maybe, but it's still a far cry from any of the hard-hitting action, emotional complexity, and maturity of its Netflix counterparts. She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, and Hawkeye, they exist purely for people under the age of like 15. If you enjoy them, bully for you, I'm happy. But don't pretend like they tell a compelling story or introduce an emotional crux that has you gripping your chair in anticipation of what could happen next. I mentioned in the intro that Daredevil never feels like it makes violence or bloodshed the focal point of a scene. The scene and the act is always about what is advancing the story and the characters, but they are occasionally surrounded by horrific violence and tremendously brutal individuals who will stop at nothing to impede that growth or present a threat to those that the characters care about, be that the city itself, other characters, their reputation, etc., etc. The violence is never haphazard, it's never shock value oriented, it's also never just cool, it's never, oh my god, that was gross. But why? Every single atrocious and hard-hitting action is supported by an important story event. Let's look at 3 core fight scenes in each season. There's the now famous hallway fight scene from season 1 that I could mention, but instead I'd say the whole escape with the Russians is way more violent and intense. We have the prison fight in season 2 where Frank takes on multiple prisoners in an attempt to keep himself alive, and then we also have the final confrontation between Kingpin and Daredevil in the season 3 finale. All 3 fights are filled with bone-breaking hits, bloodshed, and intensity. But in the first season, the fight is about Daredevil needing the Russian alive to gain information against Fisk. I mean, he even brings him back from death despite the guy being responsible for child trafficking and drug peddling in order to guarantee a certain outcome of information. In season 2, Frank killing a veritable boatload of fellow prisoners is violent and brutal to be sure, but it's all because Frank was played by Kingpin to remove an annoying thorn in his side, while promising Frank that it would get him closer to avenging the death of his family. In season 3, the final fight between Kingpin, Bullseye, and Daredevil is a 3-tiered fight to the death in order to determine the outcome of the entire criminal underworld of New York City. It's a brutally quick and effective fight that's all about remembering the various moral misdeeds of each character and reminding the audience that there's a motivation to each one. It's not just a good fight for the sake of a good fight. It holds significant weight and purpose. What I'm saying is that each act of heinous violence and deplorable bloodshed is a multi-layered attack on the moral emotional center. An effective and dangerous approach for a superhero show to tell a story that utilizes violence in a way that actually downplays violence and begs the audience to think about the ramifications of the actions that those characters take. Violence in Daredevil is effective because it takes a look at what most stories, comics or otherwise, almost always fail to convey in a meaningful and lasting manner. In comparison to this, Disney's MCU outings in TV are, to say the least, problematically the opposite. Action scenes and fights seem to hold almost no weight whatsoever, save for the always safe and standard approach of, oh no, MacGuffin 1 is going to destroy the world, we need MacGuffin 2 to stop it. This is WandaVision's Wanda powers, Loki's final Kang ploy, Winter Soldier's Walker freakout and final terrorist plot, Hawkeye's Die Hard ripoff, and Moon Knight's final battle of the gods. There's no real weight or emphasis to any of these battles because the story and characters completely fail to give them any weight. The worst and / best example I can give of this is Walker's turn in Falcon Winter Soldier. Walker feels inadequate in comparison to the larger-than-life expectations placed on him by taking up the mantle of Captain America. He's eager to prove himself, but after multiple encounters with the Flag Smashers who got their hands on the Super Soldier Serum, he feels like he can't keep up and he ends up taking the serum himself in order to have the edge. This alone is a strong basis. However, his partner mentions to him that he heard that the serum exacerbates underlying personality traits, both good and bad, and that's what made Captain America so amazing, because it amplified his willingness to do good. So again, we're piling on this moral amplitude to an already solid basis for a good character arc. So when Walker's partner is unjustly killed by a Flag Smasher, Walker loses his temper and attacks the Smasher that killed him. He corners him and brutally decapitates him with Cap's shield in front of a crowd of onlookers in a fit of pure rage and sadness. It's a powerful and sobering moment that puts Walker's entire story into question and creates a dangerous precedent going forward. Can Walker be trusted? How does the dichotomy of his actions as Captain America make the surrounding characters look, and how will it affect the world? Well, in the infinite intelligence of the writers of Falcon Winter Soldier, it actually means nothing. Walker gets beat by Sam and Bucky, he gets demoted and discharged, then immediately gets offered an alternative role as a new Captain America, so he's the same freaking person. And by the next episode, his anger and violence has completely dissipated, and by the finale, he's altruistically saving the Smashers and other terrorists because, I don't know, reasons. And bear in mind, this happens all within the span of 3 episodes, whereas in something like Daredevil, major changes and doubts like these would be adjusted and explored over the course of the entire 3-season run, sometimes not even really coming to a conclusion until the end of the series. You know, like how good writing is done and in a naturally conclusive kind of way.
Everything I took for granted, and while I try and sleep in this bleak place.
You told me you were the man this city needs. I think that was only half true.
You know, something that I really appreciated about the Marvel Netflix series, not just Daredevil, but mostly Daredevil, is that they are all written for a well-meaning and mature audience. They're not necessarily only made for adults. Okay, maybe Jessica Jones is made just for adults, but arguably most anybody above the age of 15 will find a way to enjoy the storytelling and execution of Daredevil, Punisher, and Luke Cage, and the Defenders, arguably. They're effective because while the older and more attentive you are, the more you will get out of them, they're still approachable and understandable. I can't say that a single MCU project, not even just the series, has ever followed this formula in any manner, no matter what happens. Maybe with the execution of like the last 30-ish minutes of Infinity War, but the emotional complexity in action is always undermined and ruined by an unnecessary amount of humor. And while humor isn't always the inevitable downfall, it is definitely the symptom that showcases the writing pitfalls that treats all the characters' traumas as completely disposable. There's no emotional weight to any of their decisions or major moments because they're written to appeal to a Fortnite crowd that can't be bothered to pay attention to anything meaningful or long-lasting. Just look at Thor as an example. I know everybody brings this up, but let's look at him as an example. In the first film, Thor was an unbridled and egotistic man-child with the strength of a god who couldn't control his emotions, leading to him being taken down a peg by his father, who banished him to a world that doesn't believe that gods exist, forcing him to take a new perspective on his life and find out what he really wants. And then in the next movie, he deals with the death of his mother and his brother, casting his future into doubt as he struggled to come to terms with the hand that life dealt him. And then in between all these traumatic events, in Avengers he struggles to maintain his power when Earth is under siege from an alien force. In Ultron he sees glimpses of his future, the inevitable death of the Avengers, and the realms that he will be responsible for. Then we get to Ragnarok, where he's turned into a lovable goof who hides his trauma underneath the swagger of being an Avenger and the God of Thunder. But after witnessing the death of his father, he can't come to terms with what he wants. All of this is excellent character building. It It feels like it is building towards something truly grand, truly epic, and truly heartbreaking and cathartic. But around Ragnarok is the time that Thor is just shown to be completely inept at growing and learning from any of his past traumas. Then during Infinity War, we see him at his utmost angry, dangerous, resentful of life, and then it is just completely undone by Love and Thunder, once again turning him into an aggravating and annoying goofball, supported by the completely bewildering turn in Endgame where he just genuinely seems to be useless. These things are prevalent throughout the MCU, and it concerns me that they're going to follow through into Daredevil. Whether it's Iron Man's inability to learn anything, Thor's character arc being completely undone, Hulk being nerfed into an unrecognizable moron who hardly ever even hulks anymore, the MCU has slowly but surely declined in maturity in order to cater to the lowest common denominator.
Divided me from the people that I love, counseled me to transcend my fears, to be brave enough to forgive, and see the possibilities of being a man without fear.
But what does all of this have to do with Disney's upcoming reinvention of Daredevil? Well, they're bringing back the old cast, or at least most of them. We haven't heard anything about Deborah Ann Wall or Foggy or anybody like that, but supposedly they'll probably come back. But despite that, and despite the fact that I should be excited about it, I can't help but feel that Disney pulling Daredevil into the MCU is, number one, just an attempt to capitalize on some fans that haven't been into the MCU since the Netflix series were canceled. That's just an opportunity for them to expand into yet another character that they can cater to young children and not have anything to do with what they came before. Now look, I'll be the first to admit that there is a possibility that Disney will do right by Daredevil and continue the excellent chain of events and quality and maturity that came before it with the Netflix series. But because of all the reasons that I listed before, the MCU's inability to be consistently mature, the MCU's consistency to not take itself seriously, and the fact that it feels the need to either turn every character into a coward, or that it feels the need to undermine every single bit of character development within established characters for whatever reason that I truly just boggles my mind, I don't have a whole lot of faith in it. We've already seen how they completely undermined the character building of Kingpin for Hawkeye. They turned him into just this giant, annoying, like uncle type character who was just frustrating as shit to see on screen. Despite the fact that Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin in the Netflix series was arguably one of the best villains put on screen, and somehow they just completely undid all that, I have no idea. And just my point being is that at the end of the day, I don't feel like Disney's going to do right by Daredevil's almost immaculate history within its storytelling, its characters, its maturity, its violence, its action scenes, its cinematography, everything. Whether that's because they're going to give it like a third of the budget that it deserves, whether that's because they're going to give them an incredibly large amount of crunch that they're not going to be able to like dig out a bunch of really quality stuff, whether that's because they don't bring back the same writers, the same directors, not all of the same cast, whatever the case may be, I just don't have a whole lot of faith in it. The one thing that does make me feel a little bit better is that they did say it is going to be, I think it was a 12 or a 16 episode series. That at least gives me a little bit of faith in it, that there is at least a little bit more of a core concept that's at play, and there is at least something that's actually written out for the series, as opposed to all the other MCU series that have all been 6 or 8 episodes. Feels like they're just going from plot point to plot point with nothing to really connect them in between. That gives me at least a little bit of hope. Not a lot, but a little bit. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. Be sure to leave me a comment down below on what do you think of Disney Plus adapting the Born Again storyline from Daredevil. Do you think they're going to do right? Do you think it's going to be great? Do you think it's going to be bad? Would love to hear your opinions. Be sure to leave me a comment, as I said. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I will talk to you next time.